clearly to welcome you to Camley Street and what is a pretty special day. We have some very short speeches. 2 speeches from members of staff and 2 speeches from people that have been involved with this site right from the start some 40 years ago. And we're delighted that they and you are with us to do that. At some point during the speeches, some people will appear with glasses of Prosecco, because we will do a toast at the end. So if that happens, don't be surprised. Just please do take a glass and get ready to raise a glass when Matthew proposes a toast towards the end. But having said all of that, really what I'd like to do is to hand it over to Leah McNally, who was the executive and the project manager within the trust that drove the building of this building over the last couple of years. And I still don't know how you did it during a COVID pandemic, Leah, but you did it, and with all of the help of the people in this room, you produced a wonderful building. So Leah, over to you, and have fun.
Hi, and welcome everybody. So today is really about thanking everybody who's been involved in Camley Street Natural Park from the past through the construction phase, and to celebrate and look forward to the future. We decided to call our development phase from coal drop to coal tit to celebrate the heritage of the site. And it all started with local people coming together to do something about nature and to save this site and to make it into something that people could access. So that's really how it all started, and I'm sure Jackie and David, who are speaking later, will tell us more about that. So just to talk briefly about the history, this site was originally a Victorian coal drop. So coal used to be brought from the northeast of England via the canal to fuel London until coal then became less popular. The coal drop was then demolished in the 1960s, and it was earmarked for development as a coach park. And that was in the 1980s, but it was identified by Jackie, who's here today somewhere, who will be speaking later. There she is. And she worked with local people to convince politicians, GLC, that something really special could be done here at Camley Street. So thank you, Jackie, and everybody else who was involved in the early days. So we deliberately, the people who started Camley Street, along with a very infant London Wildlife Trust, because we'd only just started in 1981, decided to call this place a natural park, so that it would be welcoming to the local community, so that it wasn't considered a nature reserve where people didn't feel they could access. And that is really why the name was chosen, Camley Street Natural Park, which I think is an important part of the history of the site. Now onto the new building, a massive change, as you can see, from what was a temporary structure, I believe, the old Forest Lodge. I think Matthew, you dug out the original brochure for it, which is quite sweet to see, which was well past its sell-by date. It was infested with rats and leaking, toilets blocking all the time, and it is absolutely fantastic to now have a facility that really reflects the architectural and the natural heritage of the site. The lovely chimney shapes you can see are based on the coal hoppers, and we've incorporated both habitat and sustainability features into the building. So I'd like to now start thanking people and naming some individuals who've been involved in this latest phase. It's a bit of a list, and I won't have included everyone, but I just did want to say thank you on behalf of London Wildlife Trust to everyone who's been involved in this recent phase. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of our funders. I know some of you are here today. Really, really appreciate the support that you've all put in, without which we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we've achieved here today. Special thanks to the National Lottery Heritage Funds, who were our anchor funder, who provided a very generous grant, which other funders then matched. they gave a lot of advice as well, and definitely it was a very complex project, not least because of the pandemic. Thank you also to our funders who have funded the community volunteering and learning programmes on site, which are really, really popular. I don't know if many of you would have seen the schools visit this afternoon, but they all looked like they had a fantastic time. Thank you to our partners at Camden Council and also at Argent. And then I'd like to also thank all of our fantastic dedicated volunteers who have worked so hard to improve the nature reserve weekly, with the amazing Carolina, who is our manager here at Camley Street. Thank you, Carolina, for working with me throughout the whole consultation, design and construction phases. It's been amazing. And now for the project team, there's a lot of people involved and lots of you are here today, and they've all, I have to say, gone above and beyond, particularly in the pandemic situation. Everyone's really worked really hard on this very complicated project. So firstly, thank you to Ian and to Ollie from Huntley Cartwright, our quantity surveyors and project managers, thank you. To Suzanne, Tom and Nozomi at Erect Architecture for the amazing design of this building. To Dean, Peter, David, Claudio, Ash for the building construction. For Alex at LUC, Katie at HTA, our landscape architects. For Ian, Andy and Julian at ground control, along with Mace and Biomatrix for landscape works, to Chris and Kellen on the interpretation and the design and illustration, and lastly all of the team and ex-team who have been involved at London Wildlife Trust, and that's everybody from Gordon, our CEO, to the fundraising team, David, Rosie, Amy, Christina and Margaret, finance, Lisa and Katie, comms, Violet Bailey, and all the ecological expertise from Tony, Edwin and Matthew, as well as a huge amount of historical research that Matthew's undertaken as part of the project. Thank you to all of the team here today who've made this event possible. Especially like to thank Abby, Fiona, Emily and Bobby and all of our wonderful trainees for all the tours and activities they've been showcasing today. And thank you to the events team who've made it a great, lovely event today. And lastly, I just wanted to share some points about what makes Camley Street special. I've sort of found out about and along my way at London Wildlife Trust, and things that have stuck into my mind. A couple of ex-staff told me that they actually did pond dip here as a child, and that did inspire them to become people who work in the nature conservation sector. So if you did see any of those children out there, you never know, maybe some of them might turn out to be London Wildlife Trust staff or work with the sector in the future. Another amazing story, which I think is probably my favourite, we had a school pond dipping session, and one of the children was non-verbal and actually spoke for the first time here at Camley Street. She was so excited to see a tadpole. So really, nature can change lives, and it is such an important space in terms of the impact that we have as a charity, and really the power of nature and the importance of the natural world, you can see right here, are really, really important. And lastly, I just wanted to reiterate again, thank you all for all of your support. Those of you who campaigned for the site, those that were involved at the beginning, all of our funders, the project team and our wonderful volunteers and our staff, everyone who's helped to secure the long-term future of Camley Street Natural Park. Thank you.
I don't know, I could move that quick. Thank you, Ian, that was wonderful. I think Professor Goode would like to say some words, as I understand it. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks very much. Well, hello everyone. That's great to see so many people here today. It's such a lovely day. I remember joining the Greater London Council in 1982, in July. And it was the day after a committee meeting had been held with the planning committee, which had decided that the coal yard here would become an ecology park. And people didn't really know what an ecology park was going to be in those days, but this had been suggested by Jackie Stern and others, and they persuaded them that this was what was needed. And I walked into the building, was shown to my office and told by a young man who'd been holding the fort, he said, "You're going to be in charge of getting an ecology park set up at Camley Street. You better go and have a look at it." That was my first introduction to this place, which was covered in buddleia bushes, and it had some interesting plants. It had broom rake, which was quite a notable thing. But I felt we needed to think about how to make the place work as a place for the community, and working with the members of the Wildlife Trust, we did exactly that. Sir Fergus Carnegie, one of the Greater London Council's landscape designers, was allocated to do the design work on the park, and he said, "I didn't know anything about ecology." And I said, "Well, I'm an ecologist, but I don't know anything about design." But we worked together and created this design along with Jackie Stern. And it was intended that it should produce a sense of containment within the city. So you weren't in the city, you were in nature. And I think it's achieved that in a very notable way. I went and gave a talk to Somers Town residents at the time, and there was a certain degree of, not exactly aggravation, but there was worry about what this thing would be, this ecology park. And I showed a few pictures, and some of those pictures, I didn't have any really good pictures of what a created ecology park would be, so I used some pictures of fen habitats from Malham Tarn in Yorkshire, a few other totally irrelevant things. But anyway, a series of pictures, and then I stopped, and there was total silence until a lady sitting in a deep armchair suddenly chuckled and said, "Do you know, this is the first beautiful thing that's ever happened to us here." And that was the first statement from the Somers Town residents. And I thought, okay, we were on the right lines, because she was their spokesperson. There were many other things like that, notable moments in the history of those early years. One I'll never forget was the young lad who was a volunteer, who said, he'd been planting trees for some time, and some of the lads who were a bit older than him started wrecking one of the trees. And he said, "Don't you touch that tree, I planted it." And that changed things overnight. That was a remarkable moment when he said that, and those kids listened to him. I don't know whether it helped a lot, but it certainly made an impact on me, that his views coming from the heart, "Don't you touch that tree." It was really important. So the early days, there were difficulties. We had travellers on the site dumping loads of rubbish, as you saw on the screen, and that cost a lot of money, £68,000 to get rid of, and several months, if not a year, of waiting until it was all gone, and then we could do the landscaping. But the great thing for me, I've not been involved closely for many years, but I have come back intermittently, and I always feel a great sense that this is one of the best things I've done in my ecological career, was to be involved in creating something like this, because I can see the faces of everyone involved. It's always been a very positive atmosphere, and to have this building now is superb. It gives a real sense of purpose and continuity, and I think it will really make Camley Street a much greater place in the future. So well done to everybody involved with the new building, and thank you very much.
Thank you, David. My name is Matthew Frith. I'm the Director of Policy and Research for the Trust, although I think I'm evolving to become the Trust's archivist, making sure we don't lose our collective memory of what the Trust has achieved over the last over 40 years. It's also a bit strange that I'm now appearing on a platform with my current boss and my ex-boss, which I don't think has happened to me in the past. I'm going to basically ask you to raise your glasses in a few moments, but it gives me great pleasure, before I do so, to introduce Jackie Stern. Now, I started working for London Wildlife Trust in 1989, and at that time, this site was under siege. So you've heard a lot about the site being created, but then there was the design to have High Speed 1, the Channel Tunnel railing, to basically come up through the middle of the site and go into King's Cross. And the Trust and the Railway Lands group basically campaigned over 7 years to prevent that happening, and eventually shifting High Speed 1 over to the revamped St Pancras station. And if that would, if we had been unsuccessful in that, Camley Street would have been a very pale shadow of what it had originally planned to be back in the early 80s. But when I started, there was this kind of fever pitch within the Trust, and the one name that was going round and round and round was, I wish Jackie was here to help us deliver us from the evil of High Speed 1. And of course, it didn't take me long to sort of look around looking for images, and I'm not going to embarrass her now, but she was here at the opening of the site, and also the gates which you all came through, which were found in a scrapyard in Crystal Palace, but they originally came from the Somerstown goods shed, which is now occupied by the British Library. And she was there in 1986 to basically encourage Ken Livingstone, the leader of the Greater London Council, as just was, been abolished a few months beforehand, and to really provide a sense of historical legacy of what the site was as its coal drop past, but opening a portal to what it could become in the future. So without further ado, Jackie, I think you've got a few words.
One of the things that I have the good fortune to be able to do now is to write poetry. And it occurred to me at the beginning of the week that I'd never written about this place. So normally you don't share a raw poem, but I'm going to do that because I trust you. And I just want to say there's something, I've just been really touched about heart and love here. It feels so present. You know, it's so present in the smiles of the kids who've been going around, and it's lovely to hear you speaking, David, of your fondness and affection and how important this place is for you. It is for very many people. So, happy for having critiquing afterwards. Camley Street Natural Park. Camley Street Natural Park. 4 words that hold a story. Camley, a Scottish family name, replaced Cambridge, the word on old maps. Why the change? When? Dickens' time, when the dust heaps of fire ash, domestic detritus piled high on this patch of land just north of Euston Road? Street, an urban paved way of dung-infused granite cobbles ringing with hoof strikes, the rumble of iron-clad wheels carting coal from the yard beside the canal, before blacktop and rubber tyres softened the rumble of lorries laden with scrapped cars that rusted into precarious sculptures beneath the gas holders' criss-cross gaze. Camley and Street, mapped in union until a trespass through corrugations, a barrier barely containing arched purple panicles throbbing with butterflies. Natural was an instinctive response to the thriving community within, the colonisers of bare ground growing up into a willow and buddleia profusion. This land wasn't wasted, but waiting. A vision bloomed to harness its potential, enable humans to thrive alongside the commonplace plants and animals, rare contact for many, children especially. Not possible. Over my dead body was the Transport Planner's response. Her plan: erase nature's labour from the map, plant coaches. Natural was the desire to resist. Park, yes. Coaches, no. A generation has grown since politicians embraced the value of wild space for King's Cross humans, and seekers of the knowledge began pausing on their mopeds. 4 words named a transformation in this small corner of London. Camley Street Natural Park was on the map, waiting to be held very dear by very many.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I don't think I can follow that, so I'm just going to ask you to raise your glasses and toast Camley Street Natural Park and all those that have been involved with the place, the vision, the feelings, the emotions, and of course the nature, past, present, and particularly for the future going forward. Camley Street Natural Park. Go and enjoy yourselves. I hope there's going to be some more drink. I need mine. My glass to be filled. If you haven't been walking around the rest of the site, please do. Otherwise, just mill and enjoy yourselves. Thank you very much. Thank you.